good to have you with us on this edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, before we move on to the big conversation point we have tonight, before we move on to the conversation about the farmers and what the Supreme Court has said and where that leaves us, I want to bring to your notice a very important and really heartbreaking story. In fact, two instances of extreme brutality that we believe need to be highlighted here on Prime Time first as we bring to you the news and facts about the crime against women in Madhya Pradesh. One story is from Siddhi district where a woman was brutally gang raped. Iron rod was inserted into her private parts. The other horrific crime took place in Khandwa where a 14-year-old girl was raped and found dead on the roof of a shop. In fact, let's take you through the details of both of these cases, starting with the one in Siddhi district where a woman was gang raped after she was alone at her own shanty, a small little shop that she ran in this village. And according to the victim's complaint, 4 accused barged into her house, raped her, inserted an iron rod into her private parts, brutally damaged her and her private parts. She suffered from excessive bleeding and is currently undergoing medical treatment at the Rewa district facility. Let's go across to Govind really to get you more details on this. Govind, first let's talk about the brutality that happened in Siddhi district. Who are these people? Have they been arrested? What happened?
Absolutely, Tanvi. These couple of quite unfortunate incidences took place in that state where the owner of or the chief of that state is called himself Mama, the protector of females. And even after that, we have seen one after another brutality with women and girl. First in Siddhi district, where a widow woman was gang raped by 4. Then after a minor girl was raped by the shopkeeper. So these are the two couple of very shocking incidences recorded from the state, where a number of claims put forward by the leaders and chief ministers, whether the previous chief minister of Madhya Pradesh, Kamal Nath, or now present chief minister of Madhya Pradesh, Shivraj Singh Chauhan, who always believe in Kanya Pujan before starting any of the project in Madhya Pradesh. But when we talk about the protection of women and girls, we find that nothing is concrete there on the ground. That's why the repeatedly incidences coming forward now. It's being told that a PM report in case of minor is still awaited. But in case of woman where a woman was gang raped by 4 people, the PM report has confirmed that it was gang rape. But brutality, other brutality which cannot be expressed in words. So these kind of incidences are continuously taking place. That's why the big question is on the law and order and specifically the security of women in Madhya Pradesh. Even Rahul Gandhi tweeted with a very horrifying line that one more Nirbhaya. So this is the ground condition here in Madhya Pradesh, which is quite disappointing and harassing one.
Yes, absolutely. Govind, you bringing us details of both of those really horrifying cases, one of them including a minor. Now, the Madhya Pradesh government didn't bring in tougher laws when it came to crimes against minors. One has to wait and watch whether they're actually able to do the kind of investigation and bring about a case where justice can then be done. In this case, we're still waiting for the details from the post-mortem to even confirm that the rape actually took place. So that's as far as these two stories are concerned. Thanks, Govind, so much for bringing us these stories. We move on to the big focus tonight. The Supreme Court stayed the implementation of all the 3 farm laws, as was being indicated, as we told you, was likely to happen if the government doesn't take this decision itself. Now, these 3 farm laws, remember, have been at the center of the protest by thousands of farmers, especially those who've gathered around the national capital. The Supreme Court has also appointed a committee consisting of 4 agriculture experts. The Supreme Court says that this committee will listen to the grievances and report back to the Supreme Court with their recommendations. So essentially, the 3 farm laws implementation has been stayed. MSP that existed before will continue. This is what the Supreme Court has said today in its detailed order about the status quo that needs to be maintained pending further instructions. Then this committee has been formed. 4 people have been named by the Supreme Court. 4 people who are very well aware of the agricultural practices and the market dynamics. Supreme Court expects them to listen to all sides, protesting farmers, supporting farmers, government, all stakeholders, and then come back with a set of recommendations to the court. A notice has also been served over the planned rally by the farmers on Republic Day, because there are some claims being made that they plan to really disrupt the Republic Day parade that takes place in the national capital. Farmers say they don't intend to do that, but of course a notice has now been issued where they will officially have to inform the court what their plans are. And the court has also said that while these 3 laws remain in suspension as conversations happen, the farmers need to be protected. The land cannot be sold for contract farming. No action can be taken against them as well in such instances. The Attorney General has been asked to file an affidavit on the claim that was made of a banned organization infiltrating this protest. So the court has said, well, give us the details, show us what details you have about these claims. And all of this is being done in the hope, the Supreme Court hopes that the farmers will call off the protest, or at least tell the women and the elderly to go back home while the conversation continues. But that doesn't seem to be something that the farmers are interested in, because the protesting farmers, and especially the 32 groups, have actually come back and said, we don't want this committee. We never asked for this committee. We don't want to go and talk to another committee, even if it is a Supreme Court appointed committee. We want to talk to the government. We want to talk to the elected representatives of the parliament and not an external panel. They've also pointed out that this seems to be a diversionary tactic by the government. Their allegation is that this is nothing but a tactic by the government. You set up a panel, you put in members, and the government seems to have misguided the Supreme Court on the members who've been appointed here, because all 4 of these members, according to the farmers, back the farm laws. So what's the point in having a panel where all 4 of them have pro-government, pro-farm laws moves? So they've outright rejected any conversation with this panel. Now we're going to ask our experts if that is okay as per law. If the Supreme Court has ordered a committee, can they say no to it? Will that be considered contempt, or is it really left to each group's discretion whether they want to go and present their views in front of this committee or not? So the protests continue. Then what happens next? And most importantly, why is it the farmers are not willing to even talk to this panel? Let's try and understand. If they have trust deficit when what the government says, and they don't believe that, why do they have a big problem here? Why are they hesitant to listen to this group or convince this group what is the problem with the laws? Let's say good evening to Dharmender Malik, spokesperson for BKU, the Bharatiya Kisan Union, which has been at the center of these protests and these hearings as well. I also have Sudhanshu Mittal, spokesperson of the BJP, Avik Saha, convener of the Jai Kisan Andolan, which is the farmers' wing of Swaraj Abhiyan. Mr. Kailash Vastev, senior advocate with the Supreme Court, joins us this evening. Lalit Patil Bhale, spokesperson for the Shatkari Sangathan, one of those farm groups which does seem to support the farm laws, and their president is actually part of this 4-member panel. So we're going to have all views here on this conversation. But first up, I actually want to start with Dharmender Malik. Dharmender Malik ji, ये समझना चाह रहे हैं हम कि क्यों किसानों को ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट के पैनल से आपत्ति है, उनसे क्यों नहीं बात करनी?
नहीं, देखिए, हमने तो सरकार चुनी है, सुप्रीम कोर्ट थोड़ा चुना है। वो देश की एक लोकतांत्रिक व्यवस्था है, एक संवैधानिक संस्था है, लेकिन हमने वोट सरकार को दिया है। हमारी उम्मीदें सरकार से हैं और हमें सरकार से समाधान निकालना है। और जिस तरह की कमेटी बनाई गई है, उसमें जो लोग हैं, उनका इतिहास है, उनके बारे में कौन नहीं जानता? वो तो समर्थक हैं इनके। एक दिन जो है द्विवेदी जी ने आज तक पे कहा था कि भाई हमने तो अशोक गुलाटी की अध्यक्षता में एक कमेटी बनाई थी, उसने रिकमेंड किया है कि ये फार्म लॉ आपको लेकर आने हैं और इससे वेलफेयर होगा किसान का। तो जो इनके समर्थक हैं, कौन लोग हैं, मैं आपको एक का बायोडाटा बता सकता हूँ, और वो तो सरकार के मतलब पूरे प्रतिबिंब है इस कानून के। तो उनसे हम क्या उम्मीद कर सकते हैं? छलावा है, धोखा करने की कोशिश है हमारे पास साथ। और सुप्रीम कोर्ट का अधिकार है, लोकता संवैधानिक संस्था है, हम उनका सम्मान करते हैं, लेकिन इनको कोई पद्मश्री है, सरकार की कृपा से किसी को पद्मश्री प्राप्त है, और कोई दूसरे कोई अलग अलग समितियों में रह चुके हैं, सीएसीपी के चेयरमैन रह चुके हैं, कोई आईएफपीआरआई के डायरेक्टर रह चुके हैं। तो ये तो सरकार के पिट्ठू हैं, इनसे क्या हल निकलेगा?
नहीं, तो मुझे ये बताएं, आप जो ये कह रहे हैं, अशोक गुलाटी पहले सरकार में रह चुके हैं, उनके व्यूज बहुत क्लियर है, उन्होंने बहुत जगह आके बोला भी है कि ये फार्म लॉस से फायदा होगा।
अशोक गुलाटी देश नहीं चलाएगा। अशोक गुलाटी ना कृषि को सिखा सकता है। अशोक गुलाटी हमसे ज्यादा क्या जानता है कृषि के बारे में? कभी अगर अशोक गुलाटी ये बता दे
नहीं,
कि
वो ठीक है,
जो यंत्र हैं उनका
नहीं, तो मैं ये कह रही हूँ कि जो आपने कहा कि उनका ऑलरेडी एक व्यू तय है, वो किसान है नहीं, चाहे उनकी एक्सपर्टीज इसमें रही है, उनका जो व्यू है वो सबको पता है। लेकिन भूपिंदर सिंह मान कौन है, ये जो जिनका नाम डाला गया है, ये आपके साथ नहीं है?
भूपेंद्र सिंह मान ना तो इस आंदोलन में साथ हैं, और देश के किसान आंदोलन के खुले शब्दों में कहूं तो गद्दार हैं। 95-96 में WTO के समर्थक रहे थे शरद जोशी और भूपेंद्र सिंह मान को मंच से उठा के दिल्ली से हमारे किसान नेताओं ने फेंक दिया था जब इन्होंने समर्थन किया था। महेंद्र सिंह टिकैत जी के साथ वो मंच पे थे, और जब उन्होंने कहा कि हम उदारवादी नीतियों का समर्थन करते हैं, और ये वे लोग हैं जो सत्ता के साथ बने रहते हैं। उस समय ये राज्यसभा गए थे कांग्रेस के आशीर्वाद से, और सरकार के साथ इनका हमेशा अच्छा तालमेल रहता है। तो ये वो सारे चेहरे हैं, सरकार किसी की भी हो, एक्सपर्ट यही लोग रहेंगे।
तो ये शाम को भी सवाल पूछा गया जब वहां सिंघू बॉर्डर पे किसान लीडर हमसे बात कर रहे थे कि आपको आपत्ति इससे है कि कमेटी क्यों बैठाई जाए, या कमेटी में कौन है उससे है?
देखिए, हमारी तो सारी जो बातें हैं, जो हमारी उम्मीदें हैं, एक्सपेक्टेशन है, वो सब सरकार से हैं। सुप्रीम कोर्ट तो हम गए नहीं ना। सुप्रीम कोर्ट तो सरकार ने कुछ लोग भेजे थे हमारा फुद्दू बनाने के लिए, लेकिन हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट का सम्मान करते हैं, और कमेटी भी कोई निर्णय देना चाहे तो दे, हमको रास्ता दे, हम रामलीला मैदान जाएंगे। कमेटी चर्चा करती रहे, लेकिन हम कमेटी के सामने अपना पक्ष नहीं रखने जा रहे। हमने भारत सरकार के पक्ष, अपना पक्ष उनके समक्ष रखा है।
ठीक है, इनफैक्ट मैं ललित भाले जो स्पोक्स पर्सन है शेतकारी संगठन से, उनसे पूछना चाहूंगी व्यू। धर्मेंद्र मलिक कह रहे हैं ललित जी कि चाहे वो भूपिंदर मान हो या शेतकारी संगठन के शरद जोशी हो, वो ट्रू वॉइस नहीं है किसान की। जो आज किसान आंदोलन कर रहा है उनसे उनका कोई संबंध नहीं है। क्या आपके संगठन का क्या कहना है?
नहीं, हमारा संगठन तो वो सही कह रहे हैं कि हम अकेले थे जब हमने WTO को गैट एग्रीमेंट को सपोर्ट किया था, और ये जो कह रहे हैं कि गैट एग्रीमेंट को सपोर्ट करने वाले किसान के गद्दार हैं, तो मैं नहीं समझता कि ये सही बात कर रहे हैं। हालांकि
आप ये बताइए,
किसानों को
देश में 2008 से 2012 तक जो आयातित शक्कर आई, और आपके महाराष्ट्र
उस समय के सही किसानों के गद्दार महेंद्र सिंह टिकैत रहे हैं। महेंद्र सिंह टिकैत ने पूरा आंदोलन सैबोटेज किया है, और जिस आदमी ने सारे किसान मूवमेंट को इतना इकोनॉमिक फिलॉसफी दी है, और इनसे कहा है कि आप लोग जो कर रहे हो वो तो जो गई गुजरी फिलॉसफी है।
एक मिनट ललित भाले एंड धर्मेंद्र मलिक, मैं एक बात बोल दूं, अगर आप दोनों साथ में बात करेंगे तो दोनों की आवाज नहीं आएगी, समझ नहीं आएगा। धर्मेंद्र मलिक जी, आप बोल रहे हैं, अगर कोई और बोल रहा होगा आपकी आवाज ऑटोमेटिकली कटेगी। ये टेक्नोलॉजी ऐसी है, आप स्काइप कनेक्शन पे हैं, तो आप रुक जाइए, उनको अपना पॉइंट रखने दीजिए, फिर मैं आपसे जवाब ले लूंगी। अब ललित भाले, जो पहले हो गया वो छोड़ दें, मुझे ये बताएं, ये 3 फार्म लॉज के बारे में शेतकारी संगठन का क्या व्यू है? आपके प्रेसिडेंट को उस पैनल में रखा गया जिस पैनल को आज अपोज किया जा रहा है, क्यों? क्योंकि उनका ऑलरेडी व्यू डिसाइडेड है, ये सही है?
नहीं, बिल्कुल सही है, व्यू डिसाइडेड है, और मैं समझता हूं कि अभी इस कमेटी का टर्म्स ऑफ रेफरेंसेस भी आए नहीं हैं कि इस कमेटी को क्या काम सौंपा गया है। ये चाहे इस कमेटी को मिले ना मिले, हो सकता है कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट चाहता हो कि इनकी जो बातें हैं वो भी सुन ली जाए, क्योंकि अभी तो ये सिर्फ पंजाब और हरियाणा के किसान हैं, और सिर्फ पंजाब और हरियाणा के किसान नहीं हैं, इनमें 500 से ज्यादा संगठन हैं। तो मुझे बताइए, महाराष्ट्र का और केसीसी जिसका भूपेंद्र सिंह मान जिसको रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं, वो तो 18 स्टेट के लोगों को रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं। और ये चंद लोग आके ये कहेंगे कि किसानों के मार्केट को अभी भी बंद रखा जाए। हम 30 साल से ये सरकार से मांग कर रहे हैं, सरकार से झगड़ रहे हैं कि वी वांट फ्रीडम टू एक्सेस ओपन मार्केट एंड टेक्नोलॉजी। तो ये बात, और अभी तो 4 एकड़ का किसान बच गया है। हम चाहते हैं कि ये 4 एकड़ जो आज एपीएमसी के स्टाइल का जो मार्केटिंग है, उसमें कोई स्केल ही नहीं बनता इसका। तो इसको टेक्नोलॉजी और इसके हिसाब से अगर 4 एकड़ को भी बड़ा स्केल माना जाए, बड़ा स्केल में रूपांतरित किया जाए, बड़े स्केल में उसको कन्वर्ट कर दिया जाए टेक्नोलॉजी के माध्यम से, तो इनको क्या आपत्ति हो सकती है?
धर्मेंद्र मलिक जवाब देंगे।
देखिए, अभी आपने जो कहा शेतकारी संगठन के हमारे जो भाई हैं, मैं ये कहता हूं कि कागज पे लिख देने से संगठन नहीं बन जाता। आपने कहा 18 स्टेट रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं। आप मुझे 1 साल के एक स्टेट के 2 आंदोलन दिखा दो, कोई कटिंग दिखा दो, आपका कहीं आंदोलन हुआ हो। आपने महाराष्ट्र के सिवाय भूपेंद्र मान ने पिछले 5 साल में कोई रैली की हो? और दूसरा मेरा आपसे सवाल,
एचटीबीटी का आंदोलन जो अभी पिछले साल हुआ है, इसी सरकार के खिलाफ में हमने एचटीबीटी का आंदोलन किया है। एचटीबीटी हमने बोया है, मैंने बोया है एचटीबीटी। और अब मैं अभी मुझे तो सरकार 5 साल के लिए जेल में डालने जा रही है।
अब आप बोलना, मैंने आपको
धैर्य से कह रहे हैं ये प्रो सरकार है।
आप ध्यान से सुनिए, मैंने आपके बीच में नहीं बोला जब मुझे टोक दिया गया। 18 राज्यों में क्या आंदोलन किए आपने, इसको थोड़ा कल पब्लिश कर दो, मेरा व्हाट्सएप नंबर ले लो। दूसरा, मैं आपको कहना चाहता हूं कि अगर आप 18 राज्यों के किसानों का प्रतिनिधित्व करते हैं, तो आप 18 राज्यों से 18,000 किसान दिल्ली लेकर आए, तो मैं मानूं कि आप टीवी पे सच बोल रहे हैं। और उनके खसरा और खतुन्नी वो किसान है भी, उनको साथ लेते आना।
ओके, लेट मी मैं ये इसलिए ये सवाल पूछ रही हूँ और आप दोनों से ये बात कर रहे हैं क्योंकि हम ये समझना चाह रहे हैं कि क्यों जो एक साइड ऑफ किसान हैं जो प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं, जो लॉज के अगेंस्ट है, वो क्यों इस कमेटी के द्वारा बातचीत नहीं करना चाह रहे। सरकार से बातचीत करके अभी तक कुछ हल मिला नहीं, वहाँ पे वो जो डिमांड कर रहे हैं उसका कुछ आंसर आया नहीं। अब जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट कह रहा है उस पर भी भरोसा नहीं करना चाह रहे। दैट्स द क्वेश्चन अवीक साहा, व्हाई नॉट? आई अंडरस्टैंड यू से because we elected the government, but this is the Supreme Court of India, and all this while all protesting farmers have been saying we respect the Supreme Court, we will follow what the Supreme Court has to tell us, and now we say we don't want to talk to the Supreme Court panel.
No, we did not say that we will follow what the Supreme Court tells us. We respect the Supreme Court because we respect democracy, because we respect the constitutional Republic of India. But that's a different question. Most points that have been raised for and against, your audience has already heard. But look at it logically. Mr. Narendra Modi must be the biggest proponent of this law. He must be the biggest supporter. His cabinet must be the biggest supporter. They have negotiated with the farmers. These people have negotiated with the farmers, and the farmers have not agreed with them. Now the Supreme Court has formed a committee with 4 people who are supporters of the law. There's no debate or doubt about that. Whatever be their character and past, they are on the public domain on record saying that we support the law. And the Supreme Court is saying that the protesting farmers should go to these 4 supporters of the law, place their grievances and expect justice from them, which means these 4 supporters will be able to override the Prime Minister's decision. Is that even logically possible? So the committee formed by the Supreme Court is stillborn. It's a bad idea. I don't know why the Supreme Court did it. The Supreme Court should not have waded into this controversy at all. Its only jurisdiction was to determine whether this law is within the constitutional rights of the central government or not. Instead, it started getting into the protest. And I'll tell you why, and I'll tell you openly. The last paragraph of the order is a giveaway. The Supreme Court wants the protest to end. and is forming these committees and offering these SOPs in the hope that it will end. And the farmers are very clear that we want repeal of these laws. On the question of repeal, we will negotiate with our elected government, not the Supreme Court, not its committee, not anybody else in the world. Which is why the lawyers from the farmers did not appear today, because they were instructed not to agree to anything that the Supreme Court have to say. The Supreme Court has almost given, not almost, has given an ex-party order against the farmers. The farmers were not represented. The farmers do not wish to go to the Supreme Court. The farmers have no grievance to air before the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court still wants to go out of its way, then we have to ask this question. When we went to the Supreme Court to make MSP a legal right, why did you tell us that it's a policy decision? Go to Mr. Modi.
But Mr. Saha, we're hearing this today. We didn't hear from the biggest of the lawyers, Mr. Saha, that we had in the Supreme Court yesterday, from Dushyant Dave to Prashant Bhushan, to those who were sent to the farmers to talk to them about this. They didn't say this earlier to the court, that why are you even exploring this option? 3 times before this, the Supreme Court raised the issue of appointing a committee, and the government kept saying no. The government said we don't want to put these laws in suspension, and the Supreme Court pushed ahead. At no point did we hear from the other side. And yesterday, even before we knew the constitution of this committee, the farmers had already decided they don't want the committee. So irrespective of whether the 4 members back the laws or oppose the laws, the decision of not talking to them had already been taken.
Absolutely correct. And the lawyers who were in court yesterday were there because the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court. They were summoned, they were given notices, and they appeared. But the moment this talk about committee and going before committee, and before anything else, I want to remind you, this whole idea of committee was proposed by the government itself. And it's even there. Why the Supreme Court? Even there, the farmers said, no, we don't want a committee. We don't want to go before a committee. We've seen the fate of committee. We've seen Swaminathan report, how it has been used and abused. So we want to deal with you. Please sit with us across the table. We have issues. You have issues. We will talk and thrash it out. So committee idea was rejected months ago. And it's not as if yesterday suddenly the farmers agreed to the committee. That's a wrong interpretation of the position. Yesterday, the Supreme Court was given the due respect. Today, we stayed away from the proceedings, and we will stay away from this committee. And I also want to bring one thing. It is not optional for the farmers. The Supreme Court has said, and I read it out, the farmers' organizations shall participate in the deliberation. So Supreme Court is telling us to whom we should go to get these laws repealed. And we have to go to those 4 people who want these laws to continue.
Okay, Mr. Kailash Vasudev, on that very interesting point raised by Avik Saha, I was also going to read this out from the order where the Supreme Court names these 4 people, then says what the committee is going to do, where the committee will sit, what's the timeline. It goes to say that the representatives of all farmer bodies, whether they are holding a protest or not, whether they support or oppose the laws, shall participate in the deliberations of the committee, put forth their viewpoints, and then the committee, upon hearing the government as well as the other representatives of farmer bodies and other stakeholders, submit a report before this court containing its recommendations. Does this make it mandatory? And if the farmers say we don't want to talk to a committee, is that contempt?
Evening. You see, the direction of the Supreme Court is to bring an end to this situation, which is going to impact everybody, whether it is legislative intent of the government or the intent of the farmers. The purpose of this whole exercise was, as I see it from the order, to get the parties on the table to discuss what they can work out, because for so many days there's been a stalemate. Coming to the second part of it, now the recommendations of the committee are not binding because it's not a statutory committee, it's a recommendatory committee. Number 3, whether the Supreme Court will take into account the suggestions here, if the farmers reject it or if the government rejects it, is a matter which the court will decide. But fact is, you cannot decide the validity of a law on the basis of a recommendation of a committee set up by the court. The grounds on which the validity of a law are to be decided are very specific: arbitrariness, beyond legislative competence, and a colorable exercise of power. So if you come within the parameters of the law, the Supreme Court has not entered that thicket as yet. What it is doing at the moment is saying, look, all of you sit across the table, see what solution you can find. If you can't find a solution, the court is always there to take a decision on its own right. Now, the statements now being made that the committee is not to be trusted because they were government representatives and they were done by the government, etc. That lends the whole thing into a situation of a flux. Of course, there'll be representatives on all sides. We have Mr. Vahale sitting here. He's done a lot of service to the farmers community in the past. He himself has become liable for prosecution for various things because he opposed certain kinds of crop cultivations. You have the representatives of the Tikait family, which started the revolution for the farmers. But you see, you cannot take a hardline stand that, no, we want it this way and not that. The purpose of these three acts may be held to be controversial, may be held to be correct, but these are policies of government which have come about on the long demand of the farmers since 2012. Now, whether the farmer succeeds or the government succeeds, the fact is the change is now becoming necessary in today's changing world. I am not supporting the act. I am not saying anything in favor of the government. I want to make that very clear. I am not telling the farmers don't agitate. The only thing is come to a solution because you've got to look at long-term benefits or losses. You've got to bring into place a working system which is going to assist the growth of agricultural in this country. You refer to the Swaminathan Committee report. Swaminathan Committee report came in at a point of time when a lot of things were happening in this country. Please understand, Swaminathan began the Green Revolution in the country. He knew agriculture. So you have people who have been specialists. You've had Dr. Kurian for the Amul movement. Can you defeat that movement? Look what a remarkable institution the Anand Milk Union has become. So you see, don't reject anything outright. Sit across the table if you have points. The court will consider it. If it doesn't consider it, litigation is open to litigate. But it's not going to take anyone any place to say that the Supreme Court doesn't have the power. Supreme Court has the power. It is a plenary power under the Constitution to issue directions for a possible dialogue between parties. It has happened in the past. It is happening again. And I think it is the right way to try and find a solution to this. Because belligerence is not going to take anybody any side, whether it is the government taking a hard line or the farmers taking a hard line. If both take a hard line, a decision will have to come on the validity of these acts. Just give me a minute. These three acts have different purposes. The first is giving the right to trade. The second is that is in the concept of promoting. The second is an agreement system between a buyer and a seller. Here is where the controversy is. Moment you have a buyer and a seller situation, which can extend up to a period of 5 years, it is going to agitate the farmers because they don't want to be bound for 5 years. One crop, yes, 5 years, God knows what will happen. And in the fiscal situations, you may say that you've protected the rights of the farmers as far as the lands are concerned. Question is how long, how much, how far can a subdivisional magistrate come into this area? I'm giving you one side of the farmer's point of view. From the government's perspective, it is a policy. The policy is let's break the past, move into the future, bring about a change. These things will become a matter of controversy, which they already are. They have to be debated, discussed, and worked out because our country can't afford to do without the farmers, and the farmers can't afford to do without a government. Everything has to work as a synchronized body in the larger interests of this country.
Yes, but right now we seem to be stuck at a place where anything that is coming either from the government or even from the court now doesn't seem to be cutting any ice with the protesting farmers, the group who has decided. Sudhanshu Mittal, the farmers are actually calling this a government conspiracy. That's what was said. The government has decided to bring in this panel via the Supreme Court route as a diversionary tactic, and which is why you misled the Supreme Court into appointing few people who already back the farm laws.
First, to say the farmers are saying it, I don't think that's fair. A section of farmers are saying it, so be it. What I am seeing is, I want to have the cake and eat it also. It's my way or highway. Well, some people can afford it, but I don't think as a nation, this is a philosophy which can ever work. Now let's look at this. You just heard Dharmendra ji saying that we have elected government, we'll talk to the government. And when you go to the government, you say, look, we are talking of nothing less than repeal. So we are not willing to discuss the law. We are going pairwise. We are not discussing the merits, demerits. We have just one demand that you repeal the law. So when the court says, you say, no, we will not talk to you, we will talk to the government. Arey Baba, what is it? You first make up your mind. I mean, if it's an issue of the legality of the laws, let the court decide on the legality of the law. Any effort to bring in a rapprochement so that the situation, the impasse which has happened, is contained and we find an amicable solution, if there is an effort, I thought that should have been welcomed. But instead of welcoming it to question the competence of the Supreme Court, the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, or the intent of the Supreme Court,
No,
I
actually, they're
think that's
questioning
rather
the intent of the
unfortunate.
committee. They
No,
don't
no,
have
allow
faith in
me.
this
You see,
committee.
this committee has been set up by the Supreme Court and not by Sudhanshu Mittal or the government. Now you are questioning the wisdom and the intent of Supreme Court when you say you have set up a committee with people who are biased. So it's not the committee. Committee has not even met. The issue is you are questioning the intent and the competence and the sensitiveness and the methodology of Supreme Court. Well, there are people who believe that they are above law and they can do it. So be it. I mean, I don't think as a nation where the rule
So
of
is the
law is
government going to
paramount.
hold the next round of talks as was planned in a few days, or are you now going to simply wait for this committee to do what it has to do?
I think once the Supreme Court has mandated that a committee has to look into it, and the Supreme Court has put in abeyance the laws which have been passed, I think I'm not too sure what the government has decided till yet. So it would be inappropriate on my part to comment what the government, but I think as a logical consequence to what has been decided by the Supreme Court, probably the government will wait for the committee to make its recommendation or the Supreme Court to give any directions in the matter.
What happens
But
then, Mr.
I,
Aviksa,
I,
if the government says that, well, the matter is with the Supreme Court, they've set up a panel, what's the point in having a conversation until the SC decides? Then what do the farmers do?
The farmers will continue their protest and patiently wait, peacefully wait for the government to listen to them. That's my simple answer.
Tanvi, can I respond?
Yes.
Tanvi, you just heard Mr. Avik talking about the farmers not going to the Supreme Court. When Mr. Fulka, when Mr. Gonzalez, and when Mr. Dushan Dave were before the Supreme Court, who were they representing? I just heard him saying, no, we did not go, we were summoned. Summoned by whom? Summoned by whom? I mean, you are backtracking on all what you did because it does not suit you. That's not the way the game is played. The rules of the game are fair to all. The rules of game are not meant to be one-sided for Mr. Avik. That's not the way
Well,
the
let me
courts
just,
work or the country works.
before Aviksa responds,
Can
and
I just
I know that Mr. Bahale wants to also make a point, but I just want to clear it for our viewers as well, because so often we get, we assume that everybody knows these details, that we miss mentioning those. There was a group of petitions, a bunch of petitions that were in front of the Supreme Court filed by different parties. In the order itself, the court says that we have 3 categories of petitions. One of them is, a set of them essentially challenges the validity of the laws, which is what Aviksa was referring to. It challenges the validity of all the 3 laws that have been passed. The next category of petitions challenges the next category of petitions challenges is actually from those who back the laws, and they have actually come and filed a petition in the Supreme Court to say, well, we actually back the laws, they are constitutionally valid and they should be implemented. And the third category of petitions are those filed by individuals who are resident of that area or of NCR, who basically want the farmers to be moved out. So that was the main one actually that we were all tracking, where the farmers had, the petition was to ask the farmers to end this protest and move away. Instead, what we ended up seeing, Mr. Aviksa, was the Supreme Court putting the laws in suspension. But do respond to what Sudhanshu Mittal is saying. How did these lawyers land up there?
The petition to the farmers named 8 farmer organizations who were represented in court. The dynamics of the movement have to be understood. There are 500 organizations represented through 3 apex bodies. One is AIKSCC, which I represent. The other is Sayukt Kisan Morcha, and there is a Mahasangh. So these bodies got together. So there is a federation of federations, and only 8 were represented in court today. That's what I meant. When they went back, the other organizations said, we don't want this. And this movement is being run and run successfully primarily because there is unity of purpose. And so it was unilaterally, it was unanimously decided that we shall not participate in these proceedings because these proceedings were not initiated by us. We were summoned in these proceedings. That's what I meant. We were made respondents. Notice was served on us, and that's why we had to appear in court. We've appeared in court, but we have nothing to say, and the court is free to come to whatever finding it wants to.
Yes,
What is difficult?
For example, like you said, it's a federation of federations. For example, the Bharatiya Kisan Union actually said at one point that they will be okay maybe if the committee is formed. But once they looked at the constitution of the committee and the panel members, they said, well, this is not all right because all of them back. There is another set which was outrightly opposing everything that the Supreme Court was going to do or suggesting to do even in the past many days. And then there are groups like the Shetkari Sangathan who are completely backing the laws. Mr. Bale wanted to actually make a point. Go ahead, Lalit Bale.
No, I just want to say whatever is going there. I just want to say, see, we should agree that only Haryana and Punjab farmers are there. They are agitating. They can't take whole of India for ransom and dictate the terms by doing this. This is not good. Even whole of Punjab is not there. There are 500 organizations in one. So you can assess the credibility of each of the this thing. He's asking me to bring 18,000 people. They have brought 500 organizations are taking 50,000 people there and taking doing this all. It's not good. They should think. They should talk logically. We are ready to engage them in talks. Forget the government. At least farmers should engage with the farmers. Why there is a difference of opinion? Why we are saying that these are good? Let the government say whatever it wants to say. But why farming?
So let's take one example. Let's take one example. And I actually want to do this since you are here and we have 2 representatives from the other side. But before that, to the point that you made, Dharmender Malik wanted to also contest. Dharmender Malik, ये बार-बार यही बोला जाता है कि पूरे देश के किसान नहीं हैं, पंजाब और हरियाणा के हैं.
देखिए, अब इनको जो बोलना है वो तो कहा गया है ना, ये कुछ और तो बोल नहीं सकते. जो छत्तीसगढ़ में प्रदर्शन हो रहे हैं, कल महाराष्ट्र में जो रैली निकल रही है जन जागृति अभियान के तहत, कल राकेश टिकैत जी मुंबई में रहेंगे और दूसरा उड़ीसा में जो है 15 तारीख में प्रोग्राम है, बड़ी बड़ी रैलियां वहां पे हो रही है. बेंगलोर में 16 तारीख में बड़ी किसान रैली हो रही है. क्या इनको दिखाई नहीं देता? और मैं एक बात आपको और कह देना चाहता हूं कि जिस मीडिएशन की बात अब हो रही है, देखिए भारतीय जनता पार्टी के लोग बड़े मतलब किस तरह से बेशर्मी से बात करते हैं और क्या उनकी बॉडी लैंग्वेज है. 15 दिन पहले सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा था कि भाई देखिए आप इसका कुछ हल निकालिए. और अगर कमेटी की बात तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बहुत पहले कही थी. अगर 70 जाने गई हैं पिछले 15 दिन में तो इसका जिम्मेदार कौन? अगर आज भी हम कमेटी की सुप्रीम कोर्ट का सर्वोच्च न्यायालय का सम्मान है, लेकिन जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट इनको रास्ता दिखा रहा था तब ये एक कदम नहीं आगे बढ़े. और मैं कहूंगा कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जो टिप्पणियां की हैं, अगर ये ढंग से उनको पढ़कर देखें, जिस तरह से कानून को होल्ड किया गया है, भारतीय जनता पार्टी को तो मैं नहीं कहता सरकार किसी पार्टी की नहीं होती, लेकिन देश की सरकार के मुंह पर तमाचा है. अगर जरा सी भी शर्म इनमें बची है तो इनको तुरंत कहना चाहिए कि हम देश के किसानों की जो जानें गई हैं, हम देश के किसानों से माफी मांगते हैं.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट क्या डिसीजन लेगा? कमेटी की बात सुन के उस पर भरोसा नहीं है, फिर भी नहीं आप चाह रहे कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट जो कह रहा है, हल दे रहा है, उस रास्ते पे चले?
नहीं, हमने बता रहे, हम 2 महीने से सरकार के यहाँ परेड कर रहे हैं और अभी हमें अपने दरवाजे से दूसरे दरवाजे धकेलना चाहते हैं। अगर सरकार ये कहे कि हम किसान आंदोलन का समाधान निकालने में विफल रहे हैं और देश के कृषि मंत्री नरेंद्र तोमर तुरंत इस्तीफा दें, फिर हम विचार करेंगे कि भाई अब देश की सरकार के बस की बात नहीं रही है, अब हमको सुप्रीम कोर्ट जाना चाहिए।
Okay, Sudhanshu Mittal, please respond to this.
सरकार ने बड़ा स्पष्टता से कहा है कि हम ये कानून वापस नहीं देंगे। मैं आप सबसे पूछना चाहता हूं, पहले तो
जब कानून वापसी
अब मुझे बात, मैं आपके बीच में नहीं बोला ना, मैं आपके बीच में नहीं बोला।
ठीक है, धर्मेंद्र मलिक, आप उनको जवाब देने दीजिए, लॉ वापसी जब तक नहीं होगी तब तक घर वापसी नहीं होगी। सुधांशु मित्तल,
वो ठीक है ना, इनका अपना हक है, इनको आंदोलन करने का हक है, इसमें किसने रोका? इनको कर ही रहे।
हाँ।
प्रश्न ये है कि इस देश में कानून की प्रभुसत्ता चलेगी या कुछ लोग अपने आप में कानून बनेंगे। मैं आप सब ये जो बैठे हुए इनसे एक अनइक्विवोकल कमिटमेंट चाहता हूं कि इसकी लीगैलिटी ऑफ लॉ लेट इट बी डिसाइडेड बाय द सुप्रीम कोर्ट ना। And if the Supreme Court finds the law to be legal, let them all commit that, then they will be satisfied. But here they will not come with this commitment. They will say, no, then we'll see. Right? If in this country rule of law is paramount,
yeah,
the majesty of law is to be upheld. देखिए धर्मेंद्र जी, देखिए बीच में वो बोलता है जिसके पास तर्क नहीं होते। आपके पास तर्क है, आप अपना बोलिएगा, मुझे मेरे तर्क रख लीजिए ना। आप तो बड़े सब
धर्मेंद्र मलिक जी भूल जाते हैं बार-बार, धर्मेंद्र मलिक जी भूल जाते हैं बार-बार। अभी मैं उनको वापस याद दिला दूं, रुक जाइए, आप ही की आवाज नहीं आ रही है मुझे। आप पूछ लीजिए किसी से भी पैनल पे, आप ही की आवाज कट रही है अगर आप बोलने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। उनका पॉइंट होने दीजिए, मैं आपसे जवाब ले लूंगी।
So here the issue is, Mr. Saha is also here. Ask him if the court upholds the legality of the laws. What is the stand of Mr. Saha? You know, you can't be in a state of anarchy in this country. That I'm above law. Nobody is above law. No government is above law. No individual is above law. No organization is above law. Point is, there is a section, and when you say farmers are doing, I have serious objections to it. What mandates them to be representing the whole set of farmers? There is a point which has been raised here, that there are farmers with specific interest of regions, but there are other farmers who are equally aggrieved and who look towards this act as a savior act. So how can the one section of people hijack the entire identity of the farmers of this country? This is most unfortunate. I mean, I could have appreciated that, yes, there has been a systematically elected union, like an elected government, which then becomes the representative of people. So this union becomes the representative of farmers. These are all organizations, self-made organizations, coming together self-made, but what is the representative character? Merely because I have a unit in UP, do I become the spokesman of UP? No, I don't. I mean, I am a political person who's been in public life for 40 years. Organizations are there across the country. But can I claim to be representing the entire country? No, I can't. Simply here also, Mr. Dharmendra may have people with him, they may be holding rallies. But to be a claimant of the voice of the farmers, I think that's an exaggeration which we should all discount.
Okay.
That there are other divergent voices.
All right.
There are voices which appreciate what is there in future
yes,
for them.
and all
Because
stakeholders need to be on that table.
Years.
I don't think any of the farmer groups who may be backing or may be okay with just a few amendments and not a complete repeal of the laws should be dismissed because they are not saying, well, completely take back the laws. All of their views have to be taken in mind. Maybe even the state governments, if they have a solution on a state level basis, because agriculture is primarily still a state subject in this country, those need to be roped in as well. But here is my question, Mr. Kailash Vasudev. Like the Supreme Court also noted in its order, a bunch of petitions are actually challenging the validity of these laws. What happens to that aspect now?
Now, what will happen is that those petitions will have to be heard, because if there is no no amicable resolution of this one, the petitions have to be heard. When the court hears petitions challenging the validity of an act, it may strike down the entire act or portions of it. In the recent past, there have been cases like the Information Technology Act, Section 66A was struck down. In the bank nationalization case of 69, the act was struck down. So you see, you have a diverse situation where the court may strike down the entire act or a portion thereof. It will work when it strikes down a portion of the act, like the Securitization Act, it struck down one portion of it. So it then makes it viable and makes it workable by its own orders. It says, I have struck it down. Now let the government decide what is to be done. But if it upholds it, then the rights of the citizens are decided by the judgment of the court. In this case, there are certain provisions which have been specifically challenged in the various petitions filed. That's what I've been told. I checked with my colleagues. But the question to the farmer today is, supposing the act is not struck down and it is totally upheld, all the three acts, the Essential Commodities Act, the Agreement Act, and the Promotion Act. I call it in those three categories. The farmers will have absolutely no place then to turn around and take any subterfuge. If the act is struck down, then the government will find it difficult to reconcile because this becomes a very highly politically volatile matter. It is so volatile at this point of time that all over the country, the farmers are moving towards unrest. But coming to the court will decide the matter at the end of the day, as one sees it from the conversation on your channel right now. If it is to decide, let it be decided and let everybody take recourse to what the judgment will be thereafter. At this point of time, if the court has given an opportunity to sit across the table, reconcile matters, take it. If it doesn't come, the court is always open to take a decision. It is not shying away from taking a decision. It is only suggesting a possible way out to break this impasse.
Okay. Is the problem, Aviksa, simply put again, that you went to the court, or a few of the groups went to the court challenging the validity of the laws basis how it was passed and the central and the state's powers. But essentially what happened was the Supreme Court has set up a committee that goes into the merits of the laws.
Farmers' organization.
Just 1 second.
Yes.
I don't think the committee is going to go into the merits of the laws. It's going to find a workable solution to some of the sections which the farmers say are bad for them. They cannot go into the validity of that particular section. They can only give a recommendation that this portion of the law may be taken away.
Correct.
So they have
this
no
is
power
what
to strike
a certain section is opposing to, or could have a positive or a bad negative impact, and this is what you should or shouldn't do with that clause. Okay. Clear. Yes, Mr. Saha.
Farmers' organizations have not gone to court challenging the validity of the act. State governments have, various individuals. Farmers' organizations are very clear right from the beginning. This law was enacted by the government with the object of and purpose of welfare of farmers. But farmers do not, or farmers at least who I represent and the organizations that I'm associated with represent, do not believe this to be the case. The farmers want the government to repeal this law. If some farmers believe that this law should exist, they are free to go and lobby with the government. They are doing so. But our position is clear. We want the elected government not to make a law for our welfare without consulting us, listening to us, and creating a law according to our requirements. This is a law for our welfare. So the state governments can go to Supreme Court, individuals can go to Supreme Court. In fact, one farmer organization went to Supreme Court challenging the law, the BKU Lakhowal, and they had to pull back the petition. So this is the factual state of the matter. Farmers are not because any relief from court.
Okay. Now, to the point that I raised earlier, and I promise we're going to have, at least on a couple of them, these are exhaustive laws. There are many issues that have been raised by the protesting farmers, and between the three laws, there are many, many aspects. But, Mr. Lalit Bahale, give us one example of what the protesting farmers say is not good, but you believe is good for the rest of the farmers.
No, I will go to the extent that MSP should be completely eradicated. MSP is doing very bad thing in Punjab also. This is what we say. But they are saying we want MSP, so we are compromising with them. We don't want MSP and we don't want market committees to work. That we are asking we are asking access to open market since 30 years, 40 years. And we have been telling them this is harming you. See,
Their
all
fear
mandi.
is, okay, let me ask you this then. The fear from those who've been protesting for the past 2 months in the national capital and 6 months otherwise is that if you open the market and these are completely unregulated, then we don't get a good price. We don't get a price that we can ask for. We will have to be at the mercy of whatever large corporates come and decide to pay us. Is that that's the biggest concern? What is your response to that?
No, this is absolutely wrong. Because you are producing a surplus and you are producing more and more. How it will work? We have rice and wheat surplus, we have sugar surplus, and all the three commodities, the farmers are growing more and more, and they won't be getting market. So it is in the national interest to regulate the production also by market forces. Otherwise, all the farmers will go and produce everything. And why?
पर उसका प्राइस कैसे आप अश्योर करेंगे? सरप्लस में आया तो और प्रॉब्लम है. Then you won't get a good price.
देखिए, अगर आप फार्मिंग को एक व्यवसाय समझते हैं, अगर इट इज अ वाणिज्यिक गतिविधि है, अगर आप समझते हैं कि ये वाणिज्यिक गतिविधि है, तो इसको ऐसे एश्योरेंस वगैरह का कोई संबंध नहीं है. मार्केट तय करेगा कि क्या प्राइसेस होगी और क्या नहीं होगी. क्योंकि अगर आप मार्केट को अगर आप नहीं रिस्पेक्ट करेंगे और कोई सरकारी मार्केट बनाएगा, कोई ऐसे मार्केट बनाएगा, ये नहीं चलेगा. ये प्रोडक्शन अगर आपको रोकना पड़ेगा, पंजाब और हरियाणा के फार्मर्स को भी देखना चाहिए कि भाई अगर आप सरप्लस ग्रो करते रहेंगे और वो गवर्नमेंट खरीदता रहेगा तो अंतिमतः वेल्थ तो प्रोड्यूस सिर्फ फार्मर ही करता है और माइंस करती है. तो आपको एमएसपी भी मिलेगी तो वो आपके ही जेब से जाएगी. अब ये लोग
ये तो बहुत क्लियर है कि अगर आपको इतने सारे क्रॉप्स पे 22 से 25 क्रॉप्स पे एमएसपी चाहिए तो the government obviously cannot be paying you that price. You need to bring in the other players, and the farmers are saying the other players, whoever is the buyer, there should be a minimum selling price, just like you have a maximum retail price. Dharmender Malik wants to respond. Dharmender Malik.
जी, मैं पहले जी को बताना चाहता हूं कि देखिए, आप जानते सब हैं पर बोल कुछ और रहे हैं. भारत सरकार 23 से 25 फसलों का एमएसपी तो तय करती है, लेकिन केवल खरीद करती है गेहूं और चावल की. विपरीत परिस्थितियों में कभी कपास खरीद ली या कभी दूसरी चीजें खरीद ली, वो हमारे पे कोई एहसान नहीं करती. उसको पीडीएस में गेहूं और चावल ही चाहिए. तो जो सरकार कृषि विविधीकरण का ढोल पीटती है या जो सरप्लस की बात है, वो सरकार की गलत नीतियों का खामियाजा है. अगर सरकार पूरे देश के फार्मर को प्रोटेक्ट करे, हमारी लड़ाई क्या है? सुनिए आप, हमारी लड़ाई क्या है? हमारा पहला मुद्दा है एमएसपी. देश में जो भाव सरकार घोषित करती है उसको दिलाना किसकी जिम्मेदारी है? अगर ये कहीं लॉजिक गलत है तो आप बताइए. या तो सरकार कहे कि हम भाव ही तय नहीं करेंगे और फिर भाव तय अगर आप करते हैं तो उसको दिलाना भी आपकी जिम्मेदारी है.
पर वो तो कह रहे रखो ही मत, वो तो यही तो कह रहे हैं धर्मेंद्र मलिक जी कि ये एमएसपी का सिस्टम ही हटा दो. भाव तय करेगा मार्केट. अगर आप व्यवसाय कर रहे हैं, बिजनेस कर रहे हैं तो मार्केट तय करेगा भाव.
बात सुनिए ना, ये तो किसान को चाहते हैं, अपने आप को किसान.
ये सब रशिया में हो गया, ये सब चाइना में हो गया, उन्होंने छोड़ दिया है. आप भी छोड़िए जनाब.
ये वो जल्लाद है जो है.
आप बस ऐसे ही कहते रहिए. गालियों के बगैर आपके पास कुछ है भी नहीं.
Okay. Now let me bring in Avik Sir. Let's talk about this. The core issue, the merits of which one side says is detrimental, but the other side says completely do away with MSP. Let it be market driven.
डायरेक्ट सब्सिडी के दम पर चलती है.
The heaven of free market is America.
धर्मेंद्र मलिक जी, एक मिनट रुक जाइए. अवीक साहब से भी मैं पूछ लूं ये सवाल. हाँ.
The heaven of free market is America. American farmers are getting 28 to 30% subsidy for their production.
5%.
Indian farmers are getting 12.5%. Why do American farmers in this land where farms are in thousands of acres Mr. Patil wanted, said 4-acre farms are unviable. With farms of thousands of hectares, they are not being able to sustain themselves, and the government has to give subsidy. This is the nature of the beast. So it is not as if there was some old idea which didn't work and some brilliant idea that Mr. Patil is
Please
suggesting.
let me respond.
Not work. Mr. Patil, I do know a little bit about this subject. Let me finish. So the point is, food production and connection to the free market economy just doesn't work, because hunger is not something that is dependent on the free market. The day people like Mr. Patil
so amazed.
food is something with which you can.
Argument.
We are surplus, yaar. We are surplus.
What is the farmer's problem? Please export it. If there is production, export it.
क्या कर रहे हैं? सरप्लस की बात करते हैं। इसमें जो बोक्सम होते हैं वो तो आपको देखते नहीं। आप सरप्लस की बात करते हैं।
Tanvi ji, can I speak?
Okay, Sudhanshu Mittal wants to respond to this. Yeah.
Tanvi ji, first, what is, can I speak now? What is MSP? MSP is the price at which the government says, I will buy.
Yeah.
It is not the price of the crop which government says, this is the price of the crop. No.
Correct.
It's like every other agency determining at what price they want to buy. So government
Price
says,
fixation.
out of the total produce, there's a certain percentage of produce which I buy. Say 12% of produce I'll buy. And this, I will buy it at this rate. Now to say that the government says I will buy it at this rate, it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that everybody buys at this rate. What a frivolous argument it can be. Only such minds can give this argument. For 75 years there has been a government. I have never seen Mr. Dharmendra and everybody saying that government must ensure that
but they've run out of
is the price
patience.
at which everybody.
Fair enough, you're right.
Run out of patience. No.
Yes, but they've run out of patience. For 70 years, nobody's done anything for them. They've run out of patience. Let's be honest about it. They've lost faith. They've run out of patience. They've run out of ideas to protest, and nobody's heard them. And now they've come to a point where they don't even know whether they should be trusting the government or even the Supreme Court. And my apologies, I'm completely out of time. This has been an enlightening conversation. We will have more rounds of it with all representatives here talking about not just the way forward and what the Supreme Court has said and the government has said government must do, but the merits of the farm laws itself, which is essentially at the heart of this. Thank you so much to all of our panelists who joined us. Viewers, it seems we are back to square one in a sense. If the farmers say they're not going to go before this committee and make their representation, then the committee will end up with only one half of the case as it makes its recommendations to the Supreme Court, which is not going to help anybody. The idea of setting up a committee by the Supreme Court to talk to everybody and make recommendations, the idea behind suspending the farm laws pending all of these activities was to tell the farmers that, look, we are looking at your interests, we are interested in bringing a solution, in hearing you, so end your protests, come to the discussion table and let's have a conversation. That's not going to happen. Now, it remains to be seen whether the government will continue with its own conversations or that also gets suspended just as the laws have been suspended. It does look like a deadlock which is not going to end anytime soon. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.